Hi guys, welcome to our second day of sonnets. Today we are going to be tackling Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, which is arguably his most famous sonnet ever. So today, if you've read the instructions, today your annotations are optional. So if you just want to look at what I've done and prep yourself for tomorrow when you'll be taking the Common Lit assessment about this sonnet. If you don't feel like you need to write down any notes, you don't want the extra credit points for doing so, that's totally up to you. So you decide, but you do need to have your sonnets document open so that you can follow along. I have a printout here with all my notes on it. So let's talk about Sonnet 18. Okay, now that you can see my notes, I just want to read through the sonnet real quick with you. Starting with line 1. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possessions of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So starting with the quatrains, just as we did yesterday, you see we have quatrain 1, 2, and 3, and then the poem, the sonnet ends with a couplet. So remember, quatrains are groups of 4 lines, and the couplet is a group of 2 lines at the end. Again, we're looking for the volta, the turning point. It's usually indicated by words like but or yet. So we have the volta appearing here in the line that says, but thy eternal summer shall not fade. And the rhyme scheme, you should go through, take a look at the rhyme scheme. I'll give you a hint. Shakespearean sonnets all follow the same rhyme scheme, so it's going to be the same as the one we did yesterday, but we have day and May rhyming, so those are both our A rhymes. We have temperate and date, so B and B. So we have A, B, A, B for the first quatrain. For the second, we have shines, declines, and dimmed, untrimmed. So CD, CD. Then we have fade and shade, and oest and growest. So EF, EF. And then it ends with the couplet C and V, so GG. So again, the rhyme scheme you can see now that you're looking at a second sonnet, AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, and GG. So let's dive in a little bit what this sonnet is talking about. So when you read through this sonnet, I know Shakespeare's language can sometimes be intimidating, but we're going to go over everything together. So when he says thee, what he means is you. And in this case of this sonnet, he's talking to his lover. So whoever he's dating, he is talking directly to them when he says, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So something really important about this poem to remember is that he is comparing his lover to the summertime. So this whole thing is a metaphor, a comparison between 2 different things, between his lover and the summer. So he says to her, thou art more lovely and more temperate. So when he's making this comparison between his lover and a summer's day, he says his lover is more lovely than a summer's day and more temperate. I want you to highlight, if you're annotating, I want you to highlight the word temperate here. Temperate means calm or pleasant. So he's saying his lover is more pleasant than the summertime. He says, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. So what he's saying in there is he's saying summer's not perfect. May can be a little bit rough, and then summer's lease hath all too short a date. Summer ends. It's pretty short, only 3 or 4 months of the year for summertime. Then when we get into quatrain 2, he says, sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines. So if you're thinking about the eye of heaven and something that shines, so think of heaven being above us, something that shines above us, what would you think? It's the sun. So sometimes too hot, the eye of heaven, the sun shines. So sometimes the sun is too hot, he says. So in summertime, we generally associate a lot of sunshine. I know Vegas in particular, has a ton of sunny days a year, but most places in the world have more sunny days in the summertime. So he's talking about the sun can be too hot in the summer. And when he says, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, he's personifying the sun here, saying the sun has a gold complexion. That's like your skin tone. He's got a golden complexion. So he's saying sometimes it's always too hot, but sometimes the sun dims. So he's talking about the sun setting, or maybe going behind clouds. So the sun isn't always around. Sometimes it can be cloudy. Sometimes, every day the sun sets, so the sun is not always around. Then he talks about by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. When he says every fair from fair sometimes declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. So he's talking about there. He's talking about beauty. When you say someone's fair, a lot of times back in the day, if someone was described as a fair maiden, she's very beautiful. But he's not talking about someone who's always beautiful. He says fair from fair sometimes declines. So if something declines, guys, it gets worse, right? It's not as good. So if the beautiful are declining through nature's changing course, nature in this case is time. It's aging. So as we get older, we naturally age and become, less beautiful. So I have written down here, aging in time results in a loss of beauty. But here, when we get to the Volta, things turn around, right? The Volta is the turning point of the poem. So to date, he has made this comparison between his lover and summertime. And he said his lover is more beautiful than summertime. Summer's not perfect. Summer, can be too hot. His lover's more lovely. She's more pleasant. He starts talking about, when people get older, they're less beautiful. And then when we get to the Volta, he says, but thy eternal summer shall not fade. So the word eternal, guys, remember the word eternal means everlasting. So if you want to make a quick note, eternal is everlasting. So thy eternal summer shall not fade. So he says you, thy, remember he's referring to the subject of the poem, thee and thy means you and your. So your eternal summer shall not fade. He's saying you won't get old and ugly. Your summer will be everlasting. You will never be old and ugly. And then he goes on to say, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So when he says death bragging that you wander in his shade, he's personifying death here and saying that you will not die. He says death will not be bragging that you wander in his shade. You're not going to die. When he says eternal lines, he's talking about this poem, right? The poem has lines. He's saying that he's repeating eternal here, eternal summer, eternal lines. He's saying this poem will last forever, right? And what is this poem about? This poem is about his lover and how beautiful she is. So he's saying, listen, you're going to live on forever in this poem. The couplet at the end reinforces that. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, which we assume, if men are always around, if humans are always around, they will always be breathing, and their eyes, the function of eyes is to see. So he's saying, as long as this happens, so forever, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So he is saying in this ending of this poem, as long as people are around, as long as this poem is around, his lover will live on forever. Because this poem is giving her life. It's describing her. It is helping to keep her alive. So, the content of the poem. Sometimes it's hard to figure out the content on first glance. So when you finish reading a poem, you can usually figure out what the sonnet's topic is, what the problem and the solution. So the topic of this sonnet is you. It's the speaker's lover. He refers to her in the very first line. Shall I compare thee? Shall I compare you? The topic is his lover. The problem of the poem is that everybody eventually dies. The problem, she's going to die, right? He talks about nature's changing course. He talks about death. In this line here, death brags, thou wanderest in his shade. That's the problem he's addressing, that his lover will eventually die. But the solution that he proposes is that through the poem, she will live on. She's going to live on. I say you here because he's talking to her, but she's going to live on because he has written this poem about her. Okay? So this, again, Sonnet 18, one of his most famous sonnets, very often quoted. If you've taken notes on this would be really helpful for you tomorrow to use when you take the Common Lit assessment, but if you haven't, that's okay too. Okay, I'm back. So if you haven't taken notes, that's okay. It was not required today. The annotations were optional, but if you did choose to copy down the annotations, it's worth extra credit, and it will definitely help you tomorrow. So again, when you're thinking about this poem and you're thinking about the theme, the whole poem, is a message about comparing his lover to the summertime. It's about how through his poetry she will live on. So something to keep in mind, about this is just sort of the ego of the poet, that he thinks his poetry, or the ego of the speaker, right? Because we don't necessarily know if the speaker and the poet are the same, but the ego of the speaker to think that his poetry will be around forever and will help keep his lover immortal because his poem is, so good that it will always be popular and it will always be read by people. So just something funny to think about. But again, as we wrap this up, this is the last sonnet you're going to be studying. Tomorrow on Thursday, you will be logging into Common Lit with your Google Classroom login like you always do. And you will have the same poem to read through again. These notes should help you with the assessment that you're going to take. It is 6 questions long. You can use your notes. You can come back and access this video. All of the answers can be found in the things that we talked about. So if you have questions tomorrow about this, you can come see me on Zoom from 8 to 8:40. I will be available for you to ask questions. If not, congratulate yourselves. You just read Shakespeare's most famous sonnet, and you did a great job. So I look forward to talking to you guys hopefully tomorrow. And again, as always, I miss you, and I hope you're all healthy and well. Okay, talk to you guys later. Bye.